The war had been going on for 11 years. The Vreth Collective had not introduced themselves before they started burning things. They came from the outer dark, from unmapped space beyond the galaxy's edge where no empire or alliance had ever bothered to send a probe. The first thing they did when they found the Galactic Empire was destroy a frontier station called Relay Point 7. 40,000 people. No warning. No communication. No reason given. Just weapons fire and then silence, and then nothing where a station used to be. That was 11 years ago. In the time since, the Vreth had taken 140 star systems. They had burned planets. They had killed billions. They had fought the combined military power of 46 species and pushed it back and back and back again without once slowing down. Their ships were unlike anything in the Empire's catalog. Their weapons punched through energy shields that were supposed to be impenetrable. Their fold space drives let them appear, fire, and vanish before a targeting system could lock. Every time the Empire found an answer to one Vreth tactic, the Vreth changed tactics. Every time a defense held for a week, the Vreth found a new angle. The Empire's military analysts had a word for what the Vreth were doing. They used it quietly, in private reports, in rooms where civilians were not present. The word was extinction. The Galactic Empire was 3,000 years old. It had survived internal wars, plagues, economic collapses, and the kind of species against species hatreds that took centuries to cool down into treaties. It had never survived something it could not negotiate with, could not outlast, could not find a weakness in. 11 years in, it was not surviving this well. Commander Sarah Voss had been sitting in the Grand War Chamber on Verath Prime for 4 straight days. She had slept in her chair twice. She had eaten whatever the Zorathi staff brought her, which was nutritious in the way that military rations were nutritious, technically correct, entirely joyless. She had consumed a great deal of the coffee substitute that the Zorathi served in tall silver pitchers, which tasted the way a burnt tire smelled but had enough caffeine in it to keep a human awake, so she drank it. The Grand War Chamber was enormous. It needed to be. 46 species meant 46 delegations, each with their own body size, their own atmospheric preferences, their own cultural requirements for how to arrange themselves during a serious discussion. Some species sat, some stood. The haltery delegates hovered 2 feet off the floor by means nobody had ever fully explained to Voss. The Goran representative, a being called Deep Stone, occupied a section of floor roughly the size of a small apartment. The room had been built to fit all of them, which meant it fit no one especially well, and the air was kept at a compromised temperature that was too cold for the bird-like Pelari and too warm for the Goran, and the lighting tried to accommodate 17 different visual spectrums and mostly failed. In the center of the room, a holographic map of the known galaxy rotated on a slow, steady axis. The Empire's territory glowed blue. The Vreth advance burned red. There was a great deal more red than there had been 5 years ago. Admiral Crick stood at the edge of the map. He was Zorathi, tall, silver-scaled, 4 arms, a voice that carried the length of the room without effort. He was pointing at a dense cluster of red light that sat at the edge of the blue territory like a bruise. 8,000 ships, Crick said. He said it the same way he had been saying it for 3 days, like saying it more often would make the number mean something other than what it meant. 8,000 confirmed Vreth vessels in tight formation, moving at standard advance rate. At current speed, they reach Kalos in 18 standard days. The room reacted the way it had been reacting for 3 days, loud and in several directions at once. Kalos was not just a planet. It was the Empire's 2nd largest population center, 9 billion people, a mix of species, built over 4 centuries into one of the most developed worlds in known space. It was also the home of the Empire's primary shipyard complex, where approximately 40% of all new warships were built or refurbished. Losing Kalos would not just be a catastrophe for the 9 billion people who lived there. It would cripple the Empire's ability to fight for the next decade. After that, the math had no good outcomes. The Pelari ambassador was on her feet. Her name was Sovi, and she was small and bird-like with iridescent blue-green feathers that turned flat gray when she was distressed. Right now they were very flat. "We must commit the full fleet to Callow's defense," she said. "Everything we have, we make our stand there. If we concentrate the full fleet at Callow's, the western approach corridor is open," said Deepstone. The Goran representative's voice was low and grinding, like two large rocks being moved against each other. When the Gorans went quiet, Voss had learned they were frightened. Deepstone was not quiet. Deepstone was running calculations out loud, which Voss had learned meant the Gorans had moved past frightened into the cold space where they just started counting things. The Vreth have used this pattern 4 times. They pressure one high-value target. When we concentrate response, a second force appears at an undefended location. The Eastern Haltery systems would be exposed. The Eastern Haltery systems have a combined population of 400 million, said the lead Haltery delegate, whose bioluminescent skin was cycling through patterns that Voss recognized as agitation. Callow's has 9 billion. And if Callow's falls, the Eastern systems fall 6 months later, Deepstone said. Numbers are numbers. Numbers are people, Sovi said sharply. The argument continued. Voss drank her coffee and did not participate. This was by design. She and Chen had agreed before this session started that they would not speak until Chen was ready to speak. Anything before that was noise. Important noise, maybe, but noise. Ambassador Theo Chen sat next to Voss with a small tablet in his hand. He had been looking at the same page on the tablet for most of the last day. He was not really reading it. He was waiting, and reading was how he made waiting look purposeful. Chen was 52 years old, which was not old by human standards, but which was old for a field posting. He had been the senior human diplomatic liaison to the Empire Council for 6 years. He had been in this building for most of those 6 years. He had seen 46 species panic in 46 different ways, and he had learned that the panic always followed the same pattern. Everyone argued loudest about the last possible option, the one they were most afraid of, and that was how you knew the conversation was almost over. The conversation was almost over. Voss leaned toward him. "They're going to vote on the full fleet commitment in the next hour," she said quietly. "If it passes, we lose our window." "It won't pass," Chen said. He turned a page on his tablet without reading it. "Deepstone's coalition will block it. They'll argue for another 2 days and then they'll ask us." "You're sure?" He looked at her over the top of the tablet. "I've been watching these people for 6 years, I'm sure." He was right. 2 hours later, after the vote on the full fleet commitment failed by a margin of 11 species to 35, after the room had cycled through 3 more proposed strategies, all of which had obvious problems that everybody pointed out simultaneously, Chancellor Vren, old and white-scaled and patient at the head of the chamber, turned toward the back corner. "Ambassador Chen," Vren said, "you have been very quiet." Chen put down his tablet. He stood up. He walked to the center of the room, and 46 species watched the middle-aged human diplomat stop beside the holographic map and look at the red cluster in it. "We'd like to request 12 days, he said. The room went quiet. 12 days, Crix repeated. He was not mocking, he was genuinely confused, which on a Zorathi face looked like deep suspicion. "Ambassador, the Vreth reach Callow's in 18 days. If we do not begin repositioning now." "If nothing happens in 12 days, the repositioning starts on day 13, Chen said. "You still have 6 days from that point. My analysts tell me that's enough for a basic defensive formation." "Basic," Sovi repeated. The word came out the way you said a word when you were horrified by it, but had no other word to use. "It's not ideal," Chen agreed. "But you lose nothing by waiting 12 days. The option is still there." 12 days to do what? Deepstone asked. Chen looked at the red cluster. At the 8,000 ships moving steady and slow toward 9 billion lives. We'd prefer to explain after, he said. If it works, the explanation will be clearer. If it doesn't work, the repositioning plan proceeds and we won't waste your time on an explanation of something that failed. Chancellor Vren looked at him for a long time with those 300-year-old eyes. And what do you need from us in these 12 days? Nothing, Chen said. Don't move your ships. Don't send any fleet units into the approach corridor, that's all. You're asking the Empire, Sovi said, each word a small individual weight, to hold its most critical strategic decision for 12 days based on nothing. I'm asking the Empire to trust us for 12 days, Chen said. He said it simply, no performance in it. I know that's not a small thing to ask. The vote passed, not comfortably, 29-17, with the Goran bloc being the deciding voice. Deep Stone had argued in that low, grinding way that 12 days cost nothing if the condition was that repositioning continued on day 13 regardless. The math was clean. 29 species agreed with the math. Voss walked with Chen through the building's long corridors afterward. Zorathi architecture was built to impress, high vaulted ceilings, stone walls with the compressed weight of centuries in them, corridors that went on longer than strictly necessary because the Zorathi believed that important conversations happened in the space between destinations. Voss had started to believe that too, after 6 years. Harrow's in position, she asked. Confirmed as of 8 hours ago, Chen said. All 3 units are in the corridor. The projectors are armed and distributed. He's waiting on the signal. And the Vreth haven't picked up anything. Their sensor technology scans for energy signatures and mass displacement. Harrow's ships are running cold, no drives, no active systems, drifting on pre-calculated trajectories. Chen paused. The Vreth don't scan for things that aren't running. They've never needed to. Voss thought about that. About hundreds of human ships, dark and cold and completely silent, drifting through the void on nothing but math and preset courses, carrying cargo that would not appear on any sensor sweep. She had read the project files, all of them, even the ones she was not technically cleared for. Chen had shown her because she needed to know. She had read them in one long sitting 3 months ago and then sat in a very still room for a very long time afterward. What humanity had built was not a weapon in any conventional sense of the word. It was something closer to a key that opened a door into a place that should not have had a door. When this is over, she said, the conversation with the council is going to be difficult. Very, Chen said. Some of them are going to be angry. He was quiet for a moment. Some of them are going to be afraid. He looked at the window at the end of the corridor, where Vareth Prime's sky was turning its evening green, 3 moons just beginning to rise. We knew that when we started the project. It's still the right call. Because of Kalos. Because of 140 systems, he said. Because of 11 years. Because of what happens if the Vreth reach the core worlds and there's nothing left to stop them. He looked at her. We have one tool that no one else has, choosing not to use it because some people will be uncomfortable with us afterward. That's a choice I can't make. Voss looked at the sky. Green to violet at the horizon, 3 moons, a beautiful planet that had been serving as a war council headquarters for 5 years. She thought about General Harrow out there in the dark. She had never met him. She had seen his file, 47 years old, career officer, obsessive reader of physics journals, the kind of man who took a problem home at night and woke up at 3 in the morning with a solution, and immediately checked the math before he let himself be excited about it. He had spent 7 years on this project. 7 years of work that most of the people in this building did not know existed. In 12 days, everyone was going to know. She thought about how that was going to feel. She thought about 46 species turning to look at the humans in the back corner. She thought about 9 billion people on Kalos who were going to be fine. 12 days, she said. 12 days, Chen agreed. Outside, the moons moved. The sky went dark. Somewhere in the space between stars, cold and invisible and silent, the clock was running. On the 12th day, the war chamber was full before the first session bell rang. Nobody had told anyone to come early. Nobody had sent a message asking the delegations to be present by dawn. They had come anyway, because 12 days had passed, and every species in the Empire had its own way of counting time, and they had all been counting. The chamber filled up in the gray pre-light hours of Vareth Prime's morning, delegates finding their places in the half-dark, while the staff hurried to set up the coffee service, and the holographic map, and the 46 atmospheric adjustment panels that kept the room breathable for 46 different kinds of lungs. Voss arrived at the 4th hour of the morning and found Sophie already in her seat. Deep Stone was already in his corner. Crix was standing at the edge of the map platform with his 4 arms crossed, staring at the red cluster on the rotating display as if staring at it long enough would make something happen. Nothing had happened yet. The red cluster was still there. 8,000 Vreth ships, still moving, still on schedule, now 9 days away from Kalos instead of 18. Voss took her seat. Chen came in 10 minutes later with 2 cups of the terrible coffee. He gave one to Voss without being asked. "What time?" Voss asked. "He said he'd send the signal at the 6th hour, Chen said. "When the Vreth fleet is at peak formation, they tighten the formation when they're between transit points. Harrow's been watching the pattern for 2 weeks. The 6th hour is when they're closest together." Voss drank her coffee. It tasted like always. She drank it anyway. "Has he done a final check of the projectors?" "Final check was an hour ago. All 314 are active and holding position." 314. She had read that number in the project files. 314 devices, each one no larger than a standard freight container, each one drifting silent and cold in the dark space around the Vreth fleet, slotted into position over the last 12 days by ships running cold and invisible on pre-calculated courses. 314 anchors planted around 8,000 warships by people who had never stopped to consider that this might be impossible. That was the human way, she thought. Do the thing. Check afterward whether it was possible. If even a fraction of them, she started. "Harrow knows," Chen said. "He's run the coverage math 100 times. Anything less than 80% activation and the effect is incomplete. He won't send the signal unless he has full confidence in the distribution." "And he has full confidence." Chen looked at the clock on the wall. "He has full confidence." They waited. The 6th hour came. The chamber was now completely full, and the low noise of 46 species in quiet collective anxiety filled the air the way weather fills a room, pervasive, directionless, something you felt in your bones rather than heard with your ears. Crix had not moved from the map platform. Vren sat at the head of the chamber with the stillness of a very old person who has learned that some things cannot be hurried. At the 6th hour and 7 minutes nothing had changed. The red cluster was still moving. The math was still running. 9 days to Kalos. At the 6th hour and 11 minutes, Crix turned toward the human section of the room. "Ambassador Chen," he said, "the 6th hour has passed, we agreed." And then the sensor board operator at the back of the room made a sound. It was not a professional sound. It was the sound a person makes when they see something that their brain is refusing to process in any orderly way, a kind of short, high-pitched noise, swallowed immediately, followed by a silence that was somehow louder than the noise had been. Every head turned. The sensor operator was a young Zorathi technician whose silver scales had gone several shades paler than normal. She was looking at her board. She was looking at her board the way you looked at something when you were not sure if you were seeing it or imagining it. "Lieutenant," Crix said, and his voice was very controlled. "Report." The Vreth formation," the technician said. She looked up from her board. She looked around the room as if hoping someone else would confirm what she was seeing. "Sir, I'm not, it's not." "Speak clearly," Vren said from the head of the chamber. "The formation has disappeared," the technician said. The room was quiet for 1 second, 2 seconds. Then it was not quiet at all. "Run a diagnostic," Crick said immediately, already moving toward the sensor station. "This is a malfunction. Run the full diagnostic." "I ran it," the technician said. She showed him her board. "It ran automatically when the contacts disappeared. All systems are functioning normally. The sensors are working, sir. There's nothing there." "Nothing," Crix repeated. "No ships, no energy signatures, no residual drive emissions, no heat bloom from weapons discharge." The technician's voice was getting a quality to it that Voss recognized as the beginning of real fear. "There's nothing there, Admiral. There's no debris field. There's no radiation spike. There's no indication that 8,000 ships were destroyed or damaged or hit by anything. They were there and then they weren't. The sensors show empty space." Crick stared at the board, then he turned to the room. "Secondary sensor array," he said. "Get me the Orath relay station readings and the Pelari border outpost." People started moving. People started talking. Within 2 minutes, the chamber had every available sensor feed routed to the main display, feeds from stations and outposts and patrolling ships across a dozen systems, all looking at the same region of space. All of them showed the same thing. Empty space where 8,000 warships had been. No blast pattern, no wreckage, no debris cloud, no radiation signature indicating weapons fire of any kind, no gravity anomaly from mass destruction on that scale, no electromagnetic pulse residue, no light echo from explosions because there had been no explosions. 8,000 ships, gone, as if someone had reached into space and simply removed them. The chamber noise was extraordinary. 46 species in simultaneous collective terror was not a sound Voss had ever expected to hear and would not forget. Some species screamed. The Pelari had a high-frequency distress call that cut through the noise like a blade. Some species went completely silent. The Goran block had all frozen, all 6 representatives like statues, and Deep Stone's face had an expression that Voss had never seen on a Goran before, one she had no name for. Some species started praying. Sovi had her feathers locked flat against her body, which was a Pelari stress response so extreme that it apparently happened involuntarily. She was gripping the edge of her desk. Her 3 sets of eyes were open to their maximum diameter, cycling rapidly through her sensor spectrum. "What did this?" she said, to no one in particular and everyone in general. "What did this?" Vren had not moved. The Chancellor sat at the head of the room with those ancient 3th-century eyes fixed on the empty space on the display where 8,000 Vreth ships used to be. The white-scaled face gave nothing away, but Vren's eyes moved slowly across the room. They stopped on Chen. Chen was sitting in his chair. Voss was sitting next to him. They were not celebrating. They were not grinning or elbowing each other or doing any of the things that people do when something they hoped would work has worked. They were sitting still, and they were watching the room, and their faces were calm. Calm in a way that looked different from everything else in the chamber. 46 species screaming and praying and running sensor diagnostics. 2 humans sitting in the back corner, still, quiet and calm. Vren saw it, Crick saw it, Sovi saw it. Deep Stone's massive head turned slowly toward the human corner. Deep Stone looked at Chen for a long time. Then, in that low, grinding voice, without addressing anyone in particular, "The humans are not surprised." The room took several seconds to process that statement. Then, one by one, 46 species stopped what they were doing and looked at the back corner. Voss did not fidget. She had known this moment was coming. She had rehearsed what her face should look like for this moment. Still, neutral, present, not guilty because there was nothing to feel guilty about, not triumphant because this was not the time for that, just present. Just a human woman sitting in a chair while 46 alien species realized all at once that the humans had known. Crix crossed the room in long steps. He stopped in front of Chen's seat. The Admiral was 4 feet taller than Chen and had 4 arms and was vibrating with a kind of controlled fury that Voss recognized as a Zoratha's way of being scared. "You knew," Crix said. His voice was very quiet, very controlled. "You asked us for 12 days, you told us to trust you, and you knew." "Yes," Chen said. The single word landed in the room like a dropped stone. "What did you do?" Crix said. Chen met the Admiral's eyes. He did not look away and he did not look small. "I made you a promise when I asked for the 12 days," he said. "I promised a full accounting after. I'm ready to give it." "You'll give it now," Crix said. "Yes," Chen said. "I will." He stood up. He looked at Chancellor Vren. "With the Chancellor's permission, I'd like to request a closed session restricted to senior military and diplomatic staff. What I'm about to explain involves information that we would prefer not to broadcast on open channels." Vren looked at him for a long moment, that 300-year-old consideration. "You have it," Vren said. While the chamber staff cleared the room down to senior staff and the door seals went active, Voss stood at the window and looked at the sky. Vareth Prime was in its morning now, the green sky bright and clear. Somewhere out there, 9 days away, there was a patch of space that used to hold 8,000 warships and now held nothing. Somewhere out there, General Harrow's ships were turning on their drives again, coming out of their cold silence, beginning the long trip back. She imagined the signal reaching them, not the activation signal that had already gone. The confirmation signal. The one that said it worked. She thought about what that felt like on Harrow's ship, in the moment when the sensors showed empty space and the math came true. She thought about 7 years of work, 7 years of secrecy and failure and trying again, all coming down to one signal sent into the dark. She thought about 9 billion people on Kalos who would wake up today, not knowing anything had almost happened to them. The door sealed behind the last cleared delegate. The chamber was now 23 people and 46 empty seats. Crix stood at the center of the map, where the holographic display still showed the empty space with clinical precision. Sovi sat with her feathers slowly re-expanding. Deep Stone was still in the corner, still with that expression Voss had no name for. Chen walked to the center of the room. He looked at 23 senior representatives of the Galactic Empire. 7 years ago, he said, we started building something. The room was very, very quiet. I'm going to tell you what it is. Before Chen could say another word, Crix held up one of his 4 hands. First, the Admiral said, I want a scout team at that location. Chen nodded. That's reasonable. Not a request, Crix said. His voice had the flatness of a man holding himself together by will alone. I am not asking your permission, Ambassador. I am telling you what is happening next. 3 fast scout ships, independent sensor arrays, full recording packages. I want eyes on that location before I sit and listen to whatever you're about to tell me. Chen nodded again. Send them. The scouts launched within the hour. 3 Zorathi fast movers, the kind of ships built for speed and sensor range over everything else. No heavy weapons. Reinforced hull, sensor arrays that could read a cold planet's geological history from 6 light minutes out. They burned hard toward the last recorded position of the Vreth fleet and arrived 4 hours and 20 minutes later. The chamber waited. Voss spent the 4 hours and 20 minutes doing what she always did when she was waiting for something she could not control. She found a quiet corner, she sat in it, and she went through the project files in her head. Not reviewing them for new information, she had the files memorized at this point. Just walking through them the way you walked through a room you knew well, touching the walls, making sure everything was still where it was supposed to be. 7 years, 218 scientists and engineers, 17 failed prototypes, 1 breakthrough that had looked at first like another failure. The breakthrough had come from a Vreth shipwreck. In the 4th year of the war, an Empire patrol had found a Vreth vessel drifting cold and dead in the Terran system, damaged in an earlier engagement, its crew gone, its systems shut down. It was the most complete Vreth wreck anyone had ever gotten their hands on. The Empire had taken it apart very carefully and distributed the findings to every research team in the Alliance. Most teams focused on the weapon systems, or the hull composition, or the energy shielding. Those were the obvious priorities. Those were what was killing Empire soldiers. The human team had gone looking at the drive. Specifically, a physicist named Dr. Rena Akwu had spent 8 months looking at the Vreth fold space drive and asking a question nobody else had asked, which was, where exactly do the ships go when they fold? The standard answer was that they folded through a compression of local spacetime and came out somewhere else. That was how fold space travel worked in every known species implementation. You went in, the space between where you were and where you wanted to be got very small very briefly, and then you were there. Akwu's question was more specific. She wanted to know what happened to the specific bubble of spacetime the ship occupied during the fold. Where did that go? What happened to the zero-point energy in that space? The Vreth drive was more powerful than any fold space drive the Empire had ever built. It folded faster, harder, over greater distances, which meant it was doing something more aggressive to local spacetime than any known drive. The answer she found after 8 months was that the Vreth drive did not just compress local spacetime. It sheared it. A very small, very controlled shear, along specific quantum boundaries that snapped back into place a microsecond after the ship passed through. The snapback was what powered the exit. The released energy pushed the ship out the other side. Akwu had looked at this mechanism for a long time. Then she had asked a second question, which was, what if you triggered the shear and prevented the snapback? The scouts reached the last recorded position of the Vreth fleet at the 4th hour and 18th minute. The chamber got the first sensor feed 2 minutes later. The display updated. The room went so quiet that Voss could hear the atmospheric system running. Empty space. The scouts' arrays were running at maximum sensitivity. They could have detected a rock the size of a briefcase at this distance. They were scanning for energy signatures, mass particles, frozen atmosphere, carbon traces, biological matter, metal fragments, drive residue, weapon residue, any residue of any kind. They were scanning for the specific spectral signatures of Vreth hull composition, which the Empire had catalogued from 11 years of engagements. They were scanning for radiation bloom from structural collapse. They were scanning for gravity echoes from mass displacement. The sensors found none of it. Not a fragment, not a particle, not a single atom of 8,000 warships and their crews. The space where the Vreth fleet had been was not empty the way space is empty after a battle, where the wreckage drifts and the drive plasma cools slowly over weeks. It was empty the way a clean room is empty, the way a place is empty when nothing was ever there. Nothing, the sensor operator said. Her voice had the quality of someone reading a report they did not want to be reading. No debris field, no organic matter, no metal alloy signatures consistent with Vreth hull composition, no electromagnetic residue, no radiation bloom. The background radiation in that region is completely normal. It matches the expected baseline for undisturbed open space in this sector. She paused. It is as if the fleet was never there. Crick stood at the display for a long time. His 4 arms hung at his sides, which was unusual for him. Crix was a person who used his arms when he talked, when he thought, when he was simply standing. 4 arms at rest meant something had knocked the motion out of him. That is not possible, he said. That is not physically possible. 8,000 ships cannot cease to exist without leaving. He stopped. He looked at the readout. He looked at it a long time. There is not even a temperature differential, he said. There is no heat signature. There is no when matter is destroyed it leaves heat. Energy is conserved. You cannot destroy 8,000 ships and have no temperature differential in the surrounding space. He turned. What took them did not destroy them. Destroying them would leave heat. The room absorbed that. Sophie spoke first. Her feathers were doing the involuntary flat thing again. Then where are they? Nobody answered. The theories started within the hour. The Halteri delegates requested an emergency private session with their own science team. They came back 40 minutes later with an expression that Voss associated with people who had just had a religious belief confirmed in a way that they were not entirely comfortable with. The lead Halteri delegate, a tall luminescent being named Vessel of Remembrance, addressed the chamber in a voice that was careful and slow. In our oldest scripture, Vessel of Remembrance said, there is a figure, a presence that exists between stars. We have always understood this to be metaphorical, a way of describing the unknown, a placeholder for what we did not yet understand about the universe. The bioluminescent patterns on the Halteri skin were cycling through something Voss had never seen before. What our science team is telling us is that what happened in that space is consistent with a localized collapse of the quantum vacuum, which is something that our oldest theological texts describe as the mechanism by which the between removes things from the physical world. Vessel of Remembrance paused. We are not claiming this as a theological statement. We are reporting our science team's findings alongside the context in which our culture has historically interpreted such events. 3 other species delegations started talking at once. The Pelari had their own version of this, not called the between but something that translated roughly as the fold behind the fold, an ancient concept from early Pelari astronomy when they had not yet understood what lay beyond observable space. The Goran had a geological metaphor for it, the place where rock goes when it is not rock anymore. Several smaller species had similar concepts, all variations on the same theme, a place that was adjacent to the physical universe, that certain ancient traditions said was where things went when the universe decided it no longer needed them. Deep Stone said nothing through all of this. Deep Stone sat in the Goran corner and was very still and looked at Chen. Voss watched the theories accumulate. She watched 46 species cycle through scientific frameworks and spiritual frameworks and combinations of both, all trying to put a box around something that had no box in any of their existing catalogs. She watched them get louder and more urgent as the realizing set in, not just that the Vreth fleet was gone, but that whatever had taken it could presumably take other things, could take anyone, could take them. The fear in the room was a different quality than the fear of losing a battle. Battle fear had an enemy in it, had a direction, had something to fight or run from. This fear was the kind that had no direction because the thing causing it was not visible, not identifiable, not anything they could point at and name. Except, Deep Stone spoke. The low grinding voice cut through the noise the way a deep sound cuts through high ones. The humans are still calm, Deep Stone said. The room went quiet again. Everyone looked at the back corner, at Voss, sitting straight, at Chen, standing near the edge of the map platform, watching the room with the patient expression of someone waiting for the right moment. They were calm when the fleet disappeared, Deep Stone continued. The Goran voice had no accusation in it, just precision. They are calm now. They were calm when the scouts found nothing. They have not looked surprised once in the last 8 hours. They have not proposed theories. They have not joined our discussions. The massive head tilted. They know what the empty space means. They knew before the scouts went. They knew before the fleet disappeared. Another pause. I think they knew before the 12th day began. Every set of eyes in the room was on Chen now. Sophie stood up. Her voice had an edge in it. Ambassador Chen, you stood in this chamber 12 days ago and told us to trust you. You asked us to give you 12 days. You gave us no information. And now 8,000 ships are gone, our scouts find empty space, our science teams have no explanation. And you are standing there with the expression of a man who is not confused. Her feathers flared. I am asking you directly, what do you know about what happened? Chen looked at her, then he looked at Deep Stone, then he looked at Vren. I know everything about what happened, he said. The room was dead silent. I know what happened because we did it, he said. The noise that followed was unlike anything Voss had heard in 6 years of Empire Council sessions. She had expected noise. She had prepared for noise. Chen had prepared for noise. They had talked about this moment dozens of times, had thought through every reaction, had planned for anger and for fear, and for the specific kind of fury that comes when a trusted party reveals they have been holding information back. What she had not fully prepared for was the texture of it, the way it hit the room simultaneously, all 46 species, like a physical thing. Some species screamed. Some went silent. Some started talking very fast in their own languages, not an Empire standard, the kind of switch that happened when a person was too overwhelmed to maintain a second language. The Halteri delegates' bioluminescent patterns went white, which was the Halteri equivalent of going pale with shock. Crix's 4 arms came up, all of them. He stepped toward Chen with the particular kind of forward motion that Voss had learned to distinguish from casual movement, the kind that meant intent. Vren's voice hit the room like a hammer on stone. Enough. 1 word, 3 centuries of authority in it. The room stopped. Vren looked at Crix until Crix took a step back, looked at Sovi until Sovi's feathers settled, looked around the room at 46 species who were very frightened and very angry and very confused, and then looked at Chen. Ambassador Chen, Vren said, you promised a full accounting. Yes, Chen said. You will give it now, completely. You will hold nothing back. The ancient eyes were steady. You understand the weight of what you are telling this chamber. You are saying that humanity did this, that humanity had a capability of this magnitude and did not inform its allies, that for 12 days and possibly longer, you allowed this council to plan and argue and be frightened while you held knowledge that was directly relevant to the survival of 9 billion people. A pause. I am not yet judging what you did or why, but I am telling you that the accounting must be complete. It will be, Chen said. Then speak. Chen looked at the room. At 23 faces, 46 species worth of attention, all of it on him, fear in it, anger in it, something that might become something else if he said this right. He had practiced this part too. He had practiced it alone in his room late at night for months. 7 years ago, he said, one of our physicists found something in a Vreth ship wreck. He began. Chen started with the wreck. He told them about the Vreth ship found drifting cold in the Terran system in the 4th year of the war. He told them how the Empire had taken it apart and distributed the findings. He told them that every species had looked at the weapons, the hull, the shielding, and that the human team had gone looking at the drive. He told them about Dr. Rena Akwu. She was 31 years old when she started this work, Chen said. She had spent her career studying the edge cases of fold space theory, the quantum mechanics that most drive engineers ignored because they didn't affect practical performance. She looked at the Vreth drive for 8 months. She was trying to understand why it was faster than ours. She found the answer, and then she found something else. He explained the fold space shear. He kept it in plain language because half the people in the room were military and diplomatic staff, not physicists. He described it the way Akwu had described it to him, the first time she had come to his office with her findings, and a look on her face that he had initially mistaken for distress before he realized it was the specific expression of a scientist who had found something that frightened her and thrilled her in equal measure. The Vreth drive worked by shearing local spacetime along quantum boundaries, like cutting a seam in a piece of cloth. The ship passed through the cut snapped back, the released energy pushed the ship out the other end. Fast, precise, more powerful than any fold space drive the Empire had built. Akwu's question, Chen said, was what happens if you trigger the shear and prevent the snapback? The room was still. 23 people, no movement, barely any sound. If the cut doesn't close, Chen continued, the local spacetime around the trigger point doesn't return to baseline. It continues to shear, widening. The quantum boundary keeps separating, and anything inside the boundary when that happens, he paused. It goes where the shear goes, into the space between the folds, a place that is adjacent to our universe but not part of it, with no mechanism to return. Silence. Then Deepstone's voice, low and careful, "Gone." "Gone," Chen confirmed. "Not destroyed, not exploded, not scattered. Gone. The matter, the energy, all of it displaced into a space our physics cannot observe or access. The conservation of energy is maintained. Nothing is lost in a technical sense. It is simply somewhere we cannot reach." Sophie made a sound that was not quite a word. "A device that opens this shear," Crick said slowly. "You built one." "We built 314 of them," Chen said. He told them about the 7 years. 218 people had worked on the project. Physicists, engineers, materials specialists, drive technicians. They had worked in a facility on the outer edge of human space, in a system with no strategic value and no tourist appeal, and no reason for anyone to ever go there, which was precisely why they had chosen it. The project had a budget line in the human military accounts listed as Deep Survey Infrastructure, which was the kind of label that sounded important enough that no one asked questions about it, and boring enough that no one wanted to. The first 2 years were almost entirely failure. Akwu's theoretical model was solid. The problem was the trigger mechanism. To open a fold shear deliberately, outside of a moving drive system, you needed to generate a specific quantum resonance at the exact frequency of the spacetime boundary in that location. The frequency was not universal. It varied by the local gravitational and electromagnetic environment, which meant every device needed to read its local environment and calibrate the trigger in real time. They blew up 12 prototypes getting the calibration system right. 3 of the explosions were large enough that the project team had to move facilities. Dr. Akwu described the 3rd explosion as educational, Chen said. Nobody laughed, but Voss, watching from the side of the room, saw a few faces that were not quite as locked down as they were trying to be. The breakthrough came in year 3, Chen continued. A young engineer named Talio developed a passive resonance scanner that could calibrate the trigger from ambient readings without active scanning, which meant no energy signature, no detectable output, nothing for any sensor to pick up. The device went from something that announced itself to something that was invisible. He paused. That was when the project stopped being theoretical and became operational. 4 more years of work after that, refining the calibration, stabilizing the shear. Early tests produced shears that lasted milliseconds, not long enough to displace a full ship. Getting the duration right took a year and a half. Miniaturizing the device to a size that a small stealth ship could carry and deploy without detection took another year. Testing it on uninhabited asteroids first, then on decommissioned hulks drifted out to empty space, took the final 6 months. The last test 2 years ago had displaced a decommissioned Empire frigate. The ship had been there. Then it had not been there. The sensors had shown clean, empty space where a 200-meter warship had been. No debris, no heat bloom, no trace. Akwu had cried. Chen had read that in the report and found, when he read it, that he understood completely. General Harrow, Chen said, has been planning the delivery operation for 2 years. He told them about Harrow, 47 years old, career officer, the kind of man who ran his operation plans through so many simulations that by the time he executed them, the real thing felt like a rehearsal. Harrow had been brought into the project 18 months into its existence. When it became clear that the delivery problem, how do you get 314 invisible devices into the operational space of an enemy fleet without the enemy detecting you, was as complex as the device itself? Harrow's answer was the cold-running approach. The Vreth fleet used active sensor sweeps, powerful ones. They scanned constantly for energy signatures, for drive emissions, for weapons heat. They were very good at detecting threats. What they were not calibrated for, what no military sensor system in the Empire had ever needed to be calibrated for, was detecting cold objects with no energy signature. Rock, ice, drifting wreckage. Things that were not running, not radiating, not doing anything detectable. Harrow's ships, when in delivery mode, were cold objects. The drives were shut down completely. The reactors were in zero-output standby. The life support ran on chemical reserves, not reactor power. Everything electronic was on passive mode, recording but not transmitting, reading but not emitting. The ships drifted on pre-calculated trajectories, like very sophisticated rocks, while human crews sat in partial darkness and partial cold and waited. It was not comfortable, Chen said. The crews were in suits. The temperature inside the ships dropped to 3 degrees above zero. They ate cold rations and they did not move very much, and they waited. He told them how long. 12 days. The same 12 days the Empire had given humanity. While the Council had been arguing in the war chamber, 300 ships with human crews had been drifting cold and silent through the operational space of the Vreth fleet, deploying their devices one at a time with robotic arms that extended only when the nearest Vreth ship was at maximum passive sensor range, retracting immediately after. 314 devices, placed over 12 days, one at a time, each placement planned down to the second. The Vreth had not detected a single one. Why didn't they detect the ships themselves? Crix asked. He had not interrupted during the explanation. He had been standing very still, which for Crix meant something considerable was happening behind the controlled exterior. The ships were cold, Chen said. Below ambient. Harrow's engineering team built insulated hull panels that absorbed heat rather than radiating it. To a Vreth sensor sweep, the ships looked like slightly cold patches of empty space. He paused. The Vreth have never encountered an enemy that did not want to be detected badly enough to sit in 3-degree cold for 12 days. They did not design their systems to find something like that. He told them about the activation. At the 6th hour of the 12th day, on General Harrow's signal, 314 devices received a simultaneous trigger command. The command was sent on a quantum entanglement channel, instantaneous transmission. No electromagnetic signature, nothing to detect or intercept. Harrow had sent the signal from a ship that was still cold, still drifting, still invisible. 314 triggers activated within 4 milliseconds of each other. 314 fold shears opened in the space occupied by the Vreth fleet. The shears, calibrated to their local environments, began to widen, not explosively, not with any of the visible drama of a weapon's detonation. Silently, smoothly, the way a seam opens when the thread is pulled. The quantum boundaries around each device spread outward, intersecting with each other, overlapping, and the combined effect was a cascading shear that propagated through the formation faster than any ship could respond. There was no alarm they could have sounded, no evasive maneuver. The shear was not a projectile approaching from a direction. It was a change in the fundamental nature of the space they were occupying. 8,000 warships did not explode. They did not burn. They did not even have time to understand what was happening. They simply stopped being in this universe. The whole process took 11 seconds. Chen said this last part quietly, and when he finished, the chamber was so still that the atmospheric system's low hum was the loudest thing in the room. Crix spoke first. His voice was so controlled it had gone flat, the voice of a person who had made a decision to be precise, because being precise was the only alternative to something much less professional. "Why didn't you tell us?" he said. It was not a simple question. It had layers in it. Voss could hear all of them. Why didn't you tell us you were building this? Why didn't you tell us you had it when it was ready? Why didn't you tell us before the 12th day, before the Council spent days arguing, before 9 billion people on Kalos sat 9 days from destruction while you sat in the back corner with this in your pocket? Chen had known this question was coming for 7 years. Because we didn't know if it would work, he said. Not until it did. You tested it. On a decommissioned hulk in empty space, Chen said. One ship, controlled conditions, known environment, no active enemy systems trying to detect the devices or disrupt the trigger. The gap between one ship in a test and 8,000 active warships in combat formation is not a small gap. He looked at Crix directly. If we had told the Council about this project, the Council would have made it a joint project. Multiple species, multiple security layers, multiple points of possible information leak. The Vreth do not negotiate and they do not show mercy, but they do have intelligence capability. They have shown that repeatedly. He paused. A joint project would have been known to the Vreth within a year, and then we would have nothing. Crick said nothing. The secrecy was not about trust, Chen continued. We trust this council. We have fought 11 years alongside every species in this room. The secrecy was about operational security and about the very real possibility that this would fail, and we did not want to destroy the Council's confidence in human capability on the basis of a failed experiment. He looked around the room. If Harrow's operation had failed today, if the devices had not triggered, or the Vreth had detected the ships, or the shear had not propagated at scale, then 12 days later you would have moved your fleets to Kalos, and we would never have mentioned this again. Because a failed secret is better than a failed hope. The room processed that. Deep Stone was looking at Chen with an expression that had evolved over the course of the last hour. The unnameable expression from earlier had changed into something Voss was beginning to recognize. It was not anger. It was not fear anymore. It was the expression of a person recalibrating. You carried this alone, Deep Stone said, for 7 years, knowing it might not work, knowing that if it worked this conversation would happen. Yes, Chen said. And you chose to use it for Kalos, Deep Stone said. Not for your own territory, not for a human world. You used it here for the whole of the Empire and accepted that you would have to explain yourself afterward. Chen looked at the Goran. We are members of this empire, he said. Kalos is our city too. The room was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Before, it had been the quiet of shock. Now it was the quiet of a room that was starting to think rather than react. Sovi's feathers had settled. They were not flat anymore, not flared. Just settled, the way feathers settled when the acute moment had passed and the longer, more complicated processing had begun. She was looking at her hands. Then she looked up. How many of these devices do you have left? She asked. Chen looked at her. That, he said, is exactly the right question to ask. And he told them. Part 4 is ready. Chen has laid it all out, Dr. Akwu's discovery, the 7 years of cold secret work, General Harrow's invisible fleet drifting through enemy space, and 11 seconds that changed the war. And now Sovi has asked the question that opens everything up. Send **5 whenever you're ready for the final part, the aftermath, the fear, the political firestorm, and humanity's permanent new place in the galaxy. Chen looked at Sovi for a moment before he answered. We deployed 314 devices, he said. We manufactured 357 total. 43 are currently in secured storage on a human vessel in this system. He let that land. We also have the complete manufacturing blueprints, the fabrication equipment, and the team that built them. At current production rate, we can build approximately 30 devices per month. The room did the math. The room did it fast. Because 46 species with combined millennia of military experience all understood production capacity and deployment timelines. And the math resolved to the same answer, no matter who was running it. Humanity could do this again. Humanity could do this whenever they chose, to whatever target they chose with enough preparation time. They had not fired a one-time weapon. They had opened a factory. The room broke along a fault line. It was not the clean break of a simple argument. It was the kind of fracture that ran through the middle of existing alliances, cutting across species lines, splitting delegations who had agreed on everything else for the last 11 years. In the space of about 4 minutes, the chamber reorganized itself along a new axis that had nothing to do with the Vreth and everything to do with what came next. On one side, fear. The Pelari delegation, Sovi and her 2 senior advisors, moved together with a tightness that Voss recognized as a species presenting a unified front under threat. The Halteri delegates had gone very still, their bioluminescence cycling on a frequency Voss associated with deep discomfort. 4 of the smaller species representatives were talking rapidly to each other in their own languages, not bothering with Empire standard. One of them, the Senhari delegate, a small being with large eyes and an extremely expressive face, looked at Chen with an expression that was not hostile but was not comfortable. It was the expression of someone standing next to something they could not fully see and did not fully understand. On the other side, something that was working its way toward a different feeling, not comfort exactly, but its direction of travel was toward it. Deep Stone had not moved. The Goran block sat in their corner as they always had, massive and still, watching. 3 of the 6 Goran representatives were looking at Chen. The other 3 were looking at the empty space on the display where the Vreth fleet used to be. Crix was still standing at the map platform with the flat, controlled expression he used when he was thinking very hard and did not want anyone to see the thinking. Chancellor Vren had not spoken since giving Chen permission to address the chamber. Sovi spoke first, from the fear side of the fault line. "I want to be clear that I am grateful," she said. Her voice had the quality of someone choosing every word with care, aware that the words would matter later in ways she could not fully predict now. Kalos is alive. 140 systems cannot be given back, but Kalos is alive, and that matters enormously to this council and to the 9 billion people who will wake up tomorrow not knowing what almost happened to them. She paused. But I have a responsibility to say what I think everyone in this room is aware of. What we have just been told is that one species, one member of this empire, a member who joined 9 years ago, a member whose military contribution to the war has been valuable but not outsized, has been developing, in secret, a weapon that makes every other weapon in the known galaxy irrelevant. She looked at Chen. "I do not question your intentions today. I am questioning the existence of a situation in which your intentions are the only thing standing between this capability and its use against anyone." It was a fair statement. Voss had known it was coming. Chen had known it was coming. They had talked about it in the long evenings before the 12th day, in Chen's office on Vareth Prime, going through every version of every argument. Sovi continued. "The Vreth were our enemy. Today, your intentions and ours were aligned. But a weapon with no counter and no equivalent in any other species' arsenal is not a weapon. It is a permanent imbalance, and permanent imbalances do not stay stable." "She's right," said the Senhari delegate, in Empire standard this time. "She's right, and every species in this room knows it." A number of voices agreed. Then Deep Stone spoke. The Goran representative's voice was always the same, low, grinding, slow. Deep Stone did not adjust volume for emphasis. The emphasis came from the weight of the words and the silence around them. "I have a different concern," Deep Stone said, "and my concern goes in a different direction." The room gave the Goran its attention. "The Vreth came from the outer dark and burned 140 of our systems," Deep Stone said. "They killed billions of our people. They destroyed stations and planets and the accumulated work of 3,000 years of civilization. For 11 years, the combined military force of 46 species could not stop them." Deep Stone's massive head turned slowly around the room. "Today, one species with 218 scientists and one determined general stopped them. Today, 9 billion people on Kalos are alive. Today, the war ends. Not because 46 species finally found a defense or a tactic or a counterweapon. Because one species, the youngest in this empire, the one we invited in 9 years ago with polite reluctance, found the answer that none of us were looking for. The grinding voice paused. My concern is not that humanity has this capability. My concern is what it says about us that we did not find it first. And my second concern is what happens to all of us if we respond to the people who saved 9 billion lives by treating them as a threat. The fault line shuddered. Some of the smaller species representatives who had been nodding along with Sovi were now not nodding. Crix had turned from the map platform. He was looking at Deep Stone. Then he was looking at Chen. The Zorathi lost 11 systems, Crix said. His voice was still flat, still controlled. My family was from the 7th one. I was at the academy when it burned. I have been fighting this war for a decade. He stopped, started again. I have also been in this chamber for 4 days watching 46 species argue in circles about how to protect 9 billion people, and not one of us had an answer. He looked at Chen for a long, level moment. You had an answer. You used it. He was quiet for a breath. I'm not glad you kept it secret. I want to be honest about that. It is not a comfortable feeling, knowing a thing like this existed without our knowledge. But I also know that if you had brought it to this council 3 years ago when it was ready, Sovi's security concerns and the Halteries' concerns and my own concerns would have delayed it for months while we debated governance and oversight and shared control. And in those months, more systems would have burned. He paused one final time. I don't know what the right answer is. I know that Kalos is alive and the Vreth fleet is gone, and I know who did that. The room sat with this. The news from the front arrived 40 minutes later. A communications officer came in with the message on a secured tablet and brought it directly to Chancellor Vren. Vren read it. Then Vren read it again. Then Vren stood up, which was something Voss had not seen the Chancellor do unprompted in 6 years of sessions. The Vreth Collective's Second Fleet, Vren said, has stopped moving. The room absorbed this. The Vreth had a second fleet, smaller, approximately 2,000 ships, positioned as a reserve force along the outer edge of the Empire's territory. It had been a secondary concern during the crisis around Kalos, but it had been there, a slow threat in the background of all the planning. It had stopped, full stop. Zero movement, zero advance, zero change in formation. It was sitting in open space and not moving. They've received word about the First Fleet, Crix said immediately. They know the main force is gone. There's more, Vren said. The ancient voice had a quality in it that Voss had never heard before, something close to wonder. A signal has been received on the standard diplomatic frequency from the Vreth Collective. Complete silence. It is the first communication they have ever sent in 11 years, Vren said. It contains 2 words. The Chancellor looked around the room. The words are, we yield. The session that followed lasted 9 hours. Voss sat through all of it. Her coffee had gone cold. She drank it anyway. The yield signal from the Vreth was real, verified through 3 independent translation systems, and confirmed by the Second Fleet's continued stillness. 46 species processed the end of an 11-year war in 46 different ways, some of which were loud, and some of which were very private, and some of which would take years to fully surface. Delegates who had been arguing 90 minutes ago about humanity's capabilities were crying with the news of the ceasefire. The Senhari delegate, small eyes, extremely expressive face, sat in her chair, and made a sound that Voss eventually understood was laughter. The involuntary kind that comes when something too large to process finds any exit it can. The governance question did not go away. It was raised 4 more times during the 9 hours by 4 different species representatives. How would humanity's capability be overseen? What were the terms of use? What prevented a future human government with different values or different intentions from pointing this at an ally? Chen answered each time. He answered patiently and completely and without defensiveness. He had prepared for this too. The answers were not simple. The oversight framework they worked out over the 9 hours was not perfect, No framework worked out in 9 hours ever was. It would be revised. It would be argued about for years. There would be formal treaty sessions and independent review bodies and a great deal of paperwork. Chen accepted all of it. He accepted it because it was reasonable, and because the alternative, no framework, no oversight, 46 species quietly afraid of the humans in the back corner, was no foundation for anything. At one point, near the 6th hour of the session, a Halteri delegate asked if the technology could be shared. Could other species build these devices? Chen looked at the delegate for a moment. Then he looked at Vren. The manufacturing blueprints and the underlying physics are being submitted to the Empire's Joint Science Archive today, he said. Every species in this room will have access to Aquu's complete research by tomorrow morning. The Halteri delegate blinked. You're giving it away. We're sharing it, Chen said. There's a difference. We didn't build this to have power over anyone. We built it to stop the Vreth. A pause. The research belongs to the galaxy. Dr. Aquu would say the same thing. She already has. At the end of the 9th hour, Chancellor Vren called for a recess. Voss stepped out of the chamber and found a quiet corridor and stood in it for a while without doing anything. Her legs were tired. Her eyes were tired. She had been awake for something approaching 30 hours. She thought about the things that were true right now, that had not been true 30 hours ago. The Vreth fleet was gone. The war was over. The Vreth collective, 11 years of burning and killing and moving steady as a tide through everything the Empire had built, had sent 2 words on a diplomatic channel. We yield. She had spent so long not imagining the end of the war that she had to keep reminding herself it had actually ended. It sat in her mind the way a large piece of furniture sits in a room that was empty before, real and solid, but requiring adjustment every time you moved around it. She thought about Dr. Rena Aquu, who she had never met, who was currently on a human science vessel 3 light-years away, and who had been told the result via tight beam 6 hours ago. She thought about what Aquu's face had looked like when the message arrived. She thought about General Harrow, whose ships were now running with their drives on and their lights on, visible and warm, heading home at full speed after 12 days of cold and dark and silence. She thought about the 218 people who had spent 7 years in a system no one cared about, failing and trying again and failing differently and trying again, and who had not been in this room today and would probably not be in any room where the history of this day was formally recorded, because that was how large events worked. The people who made the thing were rarely the people in the picture. She thought about what came next. There was a great deal of what came next. There would be Vreth negotiations, which would be strange because the Vreth had never negotiated before and nobody knew what that looked like. There would be the long work of the oversight framework, which would consume months of sessions in this very building. There would be the rebuilding of 140 systems, which would take generations. There would be the longer, quieter work of 46 species, adjusting to a new understanding of where humanity sat in the order of things. The young species, the late arrivals, the ones who sat in the back corner and did not say much. Voss leaned against the corridor wall and looked up at the high stone ceiling. Zorathi architecture, built to last, built to make you feel the weight of history in the walls. She thought about the weight of tomorrow instead. Footsteps. Chen came down the corridor with 2 fresh cups of the terrible coffee. He offered her one. She took it. They stood in the quiet corridor for a while without talking, which was something they had learned to do over years of working together in buildings like this one. The value of a silence that did not need filling. Aquu wants to come here, Chen said eventually. She wants to present the full research to the Joint Science Archive in person. She should, Voss said. She's earned the room. She's also 38 years old and has been in that facility for 7 years and has never attended a council session, Chen said. A small pause. She asked me if the coffee here is any good. Tell her no, Voss said. Tell her to bring her own. A moment. Then Chen smiled, a real one this time, the kind that came from somewhere genuine rather than somewhere diplomatic. Outside, through a window at the end of the corridor, Vareth Prime's sky was dark. Full night. The 3 moons were up and the stars were bright and clear, the way stars are on a world with no light pollution in the immediate area, which a war council building usually was not. Voss looked at the stars for a while. Out there, in one particular patch of space that the scouts had mapped and marked with a survey beacon for whatever scientific study would come later, there was clean empty nothing where 8,000 warships had been. Out there, somewhere, a young Vreth officer on the Second Fleet's command ship was looking at a sensor read that showed his entire main force was simply gone, and he was understanding what that meant for the first time. Out there on Kalos, 9 billion people were going through their evening without knowing anything had changed. And out there, somewhere between here and human space, a ship with cold-scored hull panels and a tired crew was running at full drive speed toward home, and on its bridge, a general named Harrow was probably sitting in his chair doing what he always did after a mission, running the numbers, checking the math, making sure the thing that had happened was the thing he had planned. It was. The math had come out right. Voss drank her terrible coffee and looked at the stars and thought that sometimes that was enough. You did the work. You ran the numbers. You sat cold and invisible in the dark for 12 days while the galaxy held its breath. And then you made the thing happen that everyone else had decided was impossible. The stars were bright and clean and the war was over, and somewhere in the Empire's Joint Science Archive, a file was being uploaded with a dead physicist's name on it, Dr. Rena Akwu, and a date, and a title, and anyone who read it would know from that day forward what a human physicist had found in a Vreth shipwreck and what she had asked next, and what the answer had turned out to be. The universe was full of doors. Humanity had found one more.